I just went balls deep into a new pocket hole jig system that I had never heard of until a few weeks ago. This system eliminates the guesswork of using a pocket hole jig by automating the collar setup as well as the drill depth gauge. So let's dive into this unique system and see if it lives up to all the hype. So a few weeks ago, I looked into the incredible Masca pocket hole jig system and I was completely impressed. This system makes setup of your drill bit collars simple and easy with the use of a turret gauge as well as the holes on the side of the mounting board. And the mounting board for this jig is incredible, with storage components for each accessory that comes with the kit. And all of these features make this my favorite pocket hole jig to date. But during the video I did on this kit, comments kept on rolling in about another pocket hole system that everybody thought I should check out. A system that automates all the setup for the pocket hole jig as well as has onboard storage for all the accessories. And since I had never heard of this system, I decided to purchase another pocket hole jig to see what all this chatter is about. Which now means I've got a total of 5 pocket hole jigs now in my shop. You know, you got a bad pocket hole jig habit, just like my bad habit of eating too many Thanksgiving leftovers. This year, I'm gonna quit cold turkey. So let's dive right in and see what all this talk is about. This is the Armor Tool auto-jig. Let's open it up and take a look. So before we dive into what's inside the box, we first need to talk about pricing, as this kit today goes for $69.99, or $69.94 if you're nasty. So how does this price compare to some of the other pocket hole jigs I've looked at in the past? Well, the cheapest one we've taken a look at is the Going Make, retailing today for $49.99. Now I said cheapest, but really what I meant is the cheapest that I would recommend. As we did take a look at the Wen, which retails for $47.74, but I can't recommend it because of all the machining issues. Next up, we have the OG of pocket hole jigs, which is the Craig, and the latest version retails for $149. And finally, the most expensive pocket hole jig we've taken a look at is the Masca, retailing today for $179.99. But with the Masca, you get what you pay for, and you're never going to need another pocket hole jig, unless you have a YouTube channel. So let's get down to it, get this thing out of the box and see what it comes with. So out of the box, you can see there's not a whole lot here. There's the pocket hole jig itself, the instructions manual, as well as some sample screws. And if you're like me, one of your first questions might be, where the hell are all the accessories? Well, we'll get into that. Before we do anything with this jig, let's make a quick mounting board for it, which really couldn't be simpler. All we're gonna need is a 2x4 and some scrap plywood. The first thing that we'll do is we'll take our plywood and find the center point on that plywood. Now, since we're gonna be mounting this jig, there's one thing that we need to do, and that's to flip the jig upside down. And this is where we're going to get a look at one of its first features, which is the onboard storage for the driver bit. We want to remove that driver bit. With that driver bit now removed, we can place it to the side and take our jig and place it on that center line and square it up to the edge of the plywood. Then we can grab 3 of our 1¼ coarse thread screws to mount the jig. And since this is mostly a plastic jig, they did account for that in making the mounting holes for this jig. As you can see, the holes are reinforced to give support for those screws. So it's just a matter of driving in those 3 screws into the plywood. Now that we have the jig mounted to the plywood, let's do a couple of support wings. To do this, I'm just going to take my 2x4 and take it over to the miter saw to cut down 2 10-inch pieces. And this is where the beauty of this jig comes into play. As I place the 2x4 up to the jig, you can see it almost perfectly aligns to the top of the jig. So all I need to do to mount these 2 extension wings is to pre-drill, countersink, and drive in a couple of screws. And that covers the right-hand side of the jig, but for the left-hand side, I want to offset it a bit by about 1.5 inches. And that's simply because we want to have access to the drill bit that's on the side. So with that spacing made, I'll pre-drill, countersink, and drive in a couple of screws to mount the left-hand side. And just like that, we have this armor jig fully mounted, so let's start to talk about some of its features. So I already showed you that this jig stores the driver bit on the bottom of the jig, which is great if you're not going to mount the jig. But since I just mounted this jig, I need to find an alternative. And luckily, there's an easy solution for this. With a couple of rare earth magnets and some CA glue, we can find a home for this bit. So now that I've got my setup fully configured, let's take a tour of the jig. So not only does the jig have storage on the bottom for the driver bit, but on the side, it's got storage for the drill bit. And this is exactly why we left that little opening on the side. You can see that the drill bit and the collar are stored on the left-hand side of the tool. And one of the most amazing things about this jig is how it automates the collar setup. So stick around as we'll go over that in just a second. Right above that drill bit storage, you're going to find the hex key storage, which is going to be used to tighten down that collar. On the very front of the jig, you're going to find the dust collection chute, which unfortunately doesn't connect directly to a Festool hose, but with a little bit of jerry rigging, you can make this work. A nice feature that this dust collection chute has is the ability to quickly and easily change the direction in which the chute flows. Which may seem like a little thing, but this can be nice so that you're not battling your dust collection hose as you're drilling out your holes. Right above that dust collection chute, you're going to find your 2 drill guides. And you'll notice that both of those drill guides look a little bit different, as the one on the left is completely stationary and the one on the right is about 1.25 inches away from the one on the left. But if you're dealing with smaller stock, this can quickly be adjusted. By unscrewing the silver knob on the right, you can remove the drill guide, flip it around, and tighten it back into place with that silver knob. This now creates a smaller spacing in between those 2 drill guides for some of your smaller stock at about 3/4 inch. And in my opinion, that's some really nice flexibility, but let's take a look at how this thing clamps up. To do that, we need to take a look at the front of the jig. Here you'll find 2 components of the clamping system. You'll find the push handle as well as the clamp lever. And it's this combination that is half of the heart and soul of this jig. After you place your wood into the jig, you'll simply pull back on the push handle until the clamp rests right up against the wood. Once your wood is supported, you'll provide the clamping force by pressing down on the clamp lever. And this should provide you with all the clamping force you need to drill out your holes, but you can adjust it. If we lift up that clamp lever, you'll see there's a small knob, and this is called the pressure adjustment screw. By rotating the screw either left or right, you can either increase or decrease the pressure that's applied with the clamp, allowing you to customize how much pressure you want on the wood so that you're ensured that your wood doesn't go anywhere. And all of this is a heck of a lot easier than adjusting locking screws on the back of your jig depending on what thickness of material you're using. And that's just the beginning of some of the amazing features of this jig, as we haven't even gotten into the automation of the collar. Before we dig into the really cool features of this jig, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, and share this video, as it really does help. Also, if you haven't already, check out my website, flynndoggwoodwork.com. There you can find all sorts of fun woodworking accessories like all the t-shirts that I wear in my videos. Lastly, if you'd like to support the channel, check out my channel memberships in the description below. There you get early access to all my videos as well as 1 member video a week. Now let's get into some more automated features with this jig. Speaking of automated, that reminds me of when I went to the doctor this week. After all my tests, the doctor came in and said, "Bert, you've got a bad case of autocorrect syndrome." I told him I didn't even know I was ill. So to understand the automations with this jig, we need to dive into the clamping system just a little bit further. To do this, we need to look at either side of the jig, as this jig uses a color-coded system. If we look at the top of the drill guide, you can see there's a color-coded system ranging from 1/2 inch all the way up to 1.5 inches. This system correlates directly to the thickness of material you're going to be drilling into. If I take a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, place it into the jig, and clamp it down, we can take a look at the drill guide. Not only does the drill guide tell you exactly how thick your material is, but it also gives you a color code, in this case yellow, which corresponds to 3/4 inch. And that yellow color isn't just there for looks, it actually corresponds to a screw. Let me show you an accessory that I bought along with this jig. Along with the pocket hole jig, I also got this Armor pocket hole screw set. Let's take a look. If we look at the front of the screw case, you can see there's 5 different screws, each with a different color, ranging from 1 inch all the way up to 2.5 inches. It's these colored screws that takes all of the guesswork out of determining which length of screw you should use with what thickness of material. So if we go back to the jig, you can see that our color is yellow, which in this case is 1.25 inch screw, which I know from my experience is the right length of screw to use with 3/4 inch material. And where this really comes in handy is when you come across a piece of wood that isn't a standard size. No need for a tape measure, let's simply place it into the jig. With it locked and loaded, we can get a readout of what color screw and what length of screw we need to use for this material. And here you can see this wood is 1.25 inch thick and needs a blue screw. And if we look at the box, you can see that this is a 2-inch screw. So let's take a quick look at how this jig maneuvers to accommodate each thickness of material, running from 1/2 inch all the way up to 1.5 inches. As we push and pull the handle on the front, you can see that not only does the clamp move, but also the drill guide. It's that automatic up and down movement of the drill guide that's going to allow you to determine the thickness of your wood, going from 1/2 inch all the way up to 1.5 inches. But that's not the only thing that moves with the adjustment of the push tab. Let's take a look at the back of the jig. One of the most frustrating things about using a pocket hole jig can sometimes be setting the collar on your bit. And this is one of the reasons why I like that Masca jig so much, as you can use the turret system or the holes on the side of the mounting board. But this jig might even be easier than that system. Let's take a closer look. As we move that push tab on the front of the jig, you'll notice that it's moving something else on the back of the jig. That's right, it's automatically adjusting the collar position on that drill bit. So when you place your material into the jig and lock it into place, the collar on that bit is automatically moved to the appropriate position. It's at this point that that hex key that's stored in the onboard storage on the jig comes into play. All you need to do is to take that hex key and lock the collar in place, and then you can put the hex key back into the jig. Then you can remove that bit with the collar locked into place and you're ready to drill. And if we look closer, you can see exactly how this collar adjustment works. With the collar loosened up, you can see it fits right into this black notch on the jig. This allows it to freely move up and down along that bit until it hits the correct position, making this by far one of the easiest collar setups I've seen on a pocket hole jig. The last feature that I want to show you before we drill a few test holes is the cheat sheet that's right on the base of the tool. This reference shows you exactly the length of screw you should use for each material thickness. Not to mention, it also gives you the color code for the screw you should be using. And lastly, at the bottom, it shows you the type of screw you should be using for each type of material, whether it's a fine thread screw or a coarse thread screw, making this jig almost dummy proof. But just to be safe, let's do a couple of tests with this jig. First, drilling some holes in 3/4 inch material and then doing some in 1.25 inch. And as I drill the holes in the 3/4 inch material, I'm also doing a secondary test, not attaching the dust collection to this material. And as you can see, we have 4 beautifully cut pocket holes ready to receive screws. And about what you would expect without dust collection. Now let's try the 1.25 inch with dust collection and see how it compares. And as you saw, that dust collection works beautifully and the pocket holes are just as good. Well, I don't know about you, but I am really impressed with this jig, especially at this price point and if you're just getting into woodworking. Well, I really appreciate you joining me today, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment, as it really does help. Also, be sure to check out my website, FlynnDoggWoodwork.com. There you can find all sorts of fun woodworking accessories like all the t-shirts that I wear in my videos. And finally, if you'd like to support the channel further so that I can check out more of these amazing tools, check out my channel memberships in the description below. There you get early access to all my videos as well as one member video a week. Until next time, take care as always. Let's get it. So I saw a guy at Home Depot the other day that looked a lot like Elvis. He was in the power tool department. Yeah, he returned a sander. Come on. No? Let's try this one. So what's it called when your drill instructor gets too much sun on his lower leg? Attention. Good. All right, last try. So we had a fire drill today at the sperm bank. Everybody arrived in the parking lot well before the alarm went off. Yep, it was a premature evacuation. Come on, that was good.